The college football season has concluded, but of course, you know that doesn't stop us here at the Voice of College Football or on College Football Mafia.
Yes.
And there is always at least one big thing to talk about. We got Nathan Brown here from College Football Mafia. Of course, my name's Mark Rogers here at the Voice of College Football. And Nathan and I have what we believe is a pretty decent idea to get together once a month and talk about one huge topic in college football and to present some of the best resources, some of the best media and folks in the industry of college football to bring on as guests to get to the core of these big topics. Nathan, I appreciate you being here. I appreciate you coming up with a great idea. And of course, I jumped on it from the get-go.
I love you, Mark. I started watching these shows 3 years ago. It was almost 4 years ago now because you were at the center of it. So I'm glad to be doing something with you. I think this is a great idea. One big thing once a month, and it'll only be headliners, very big names, big ideas. And college football is in such a state right now. I don't think we could do it perfect anyway. So let's see if we can't figure some stuff out and help other people understand what's going on around them.
Yeah, and this almost takes off, in a sense, off of what you do on a regular basis on your channel. So if you could just kind of highlight what people will find there at College Football Mafia, because again, this is almost kind of a playoff of that to a certain extent.
We have big interviews, big ideas. The team that I have around me, Ute and Moen especially, we try to cover the news of college football, what keeps everything going, realignment, viewership, the money, follow the dollars, and you can usually find the success, the conflict between the Big Ten and the SEC, and how does everybody else fit in that picture? And then you have governance. I mean, just the minutia. A lot of times people don't like getting into it. We're not a place you can normally dive into the nuts and bolts of individual games, but we can help you set the stage necessarily of kind of how football runs. And why we love it so much. And that passion is kind of what we bring to the table.
All right, folks, once again, it's one big thing, and it comes your way here at the Voice of College Football and alternating shows over on College Football Mafia once a month, one big thing. And Nathan, we're happy to have our first big guest here. This is Bob Thompson. He is the co-founder of the Big Ten Network. He also worked for a long, long time at Fox Sports and has his group right now that we will ask him about. Bob, we appreciate you being here. Good to see you.
My pleasure. Good to see you guys as well.
Happy New Year, Bob. It's great to see you. Thanks for coming on and being our first official guest.
My pleasure.
So, Bob, let's, before we dive into the state of college football and the way this is all working and what it's leading to right now, would love to hear about your background, about your experience and some of your experiences in the industry.
I'll keep this very short. I grew up in Oregon, went to the University of Oregon, and upon graduation, become an illustrious door-to-door cable television salesman, walking around the streets of Aloha, Oregon, knocking on doors, seeing if people wanted to subscribe to this new thing called cable TV. So I stayed with Store for about 8 years, moved from Portland to Miami to Phoenix to Houston to DC. And the company was eventually sold, and I decided to get out of the cable system business and entered the sports programming business by starting with a group, regional sports network in Denver called Prime Sports Network. Subsequently, we launched a number of others around the country, which I ultimately became responsible for. And then we did a merger from Liberty Sports, who was the parent company, with Fox Sports. And then ultimately Fox bought out Liberty's part, and I remained with Fox for the next 20 so years in a variety of positions, the last 10 as president of Fox Sports Networks and Fox Sports International. That's about it. You know, I got kind of burnt out on the travel after 2 million miles on United Airlines and decided I would take a little break, and stayed on with Fox as a consultant and advisor for about 5 years, and also put out my own shingle as a consultant, helping everything from teams and television networks, et cetera, as it relates to sports television. That's about it. So 45 years later.
That's about it.
I'll have to say, Bob, that I was one of those early, not that I was making the decisions at like 10 or 11 years old, but one of the early cable consumers, because I didn't know anyone that had cable in 1979, but for some reason, and our household did, and that led to me being, in part, a sports fanatic from the get-go. When you can watch Major League Baseball on the USA Network and such, and TBS, of course, and
Right.
all the college football that was available that others couldn't watch throughout the week, and on
It was a
Saturday.
different world. Different
Oh
world back
yeah,
then. I
it
was
was
fortunate enough to literally get into business about 2 weeks after MTV went on the air.
so
So I certainly had something to
1981.
talk. MTV
Good year.
One.
Yeah,
I had
yeah.
something to talk to the kids about as well, not just the parents.
That is phenomenal. Leave those comments, questions, everyone there in the chat. We appreciate your super chat contributions. Please like the video and subscribe right here at the Voice of College Football. Bob, we appreciate you being here. I'll get us started, and Nathan and I can just ping pong you with questions, and we'll get into a conversation here, because I start with this. I think this started to run off the rails in that we've got this collegial model originally, because we actually had players, or at the time we called them student athletes at one time, student athletes who went to class, and they still do. And certainly we don't want to downplay that for most of them. But that was the model was the student athlete. Obviously, this was just a recreational type thing. And if they were really good at it, we're going back 1920s, 1930s, a very collegial model of what this was supposed to be, just an add-on to what the student was at the institution. Then obviously it got more and more popular. You add in 60,000 seat stadiums, 80,000 seat stadiums, and then boom, of course, television in the 1950s, and it slowly becomes a big business. Well, the two just don't collaborate very well. They just don't work well together when you got this collegial model originally, and you're trying to keep that and hold that together, and you got this multi-million, now billion-dollar business.
Yes, it's a bit of a paradox, no doubt. And I think, as with many things sports related, as you pour money into them and you see what happens, things like, the Olympics and other previously amateur type events, you're going to have some pains. And I think that certainly college football has, really in the last 2 decades, I think really kind of taken off. I think for years it was very undervalued and underappreciated, but it's kind of been discovered, and certainly the networks discovered it. I spent years trying to convince Fox to get into the college football business for the broadcast network, and never really did, other than convince them to buy a few BCS games for a few years, until after I was gone, they finally, somebody must have pulled out one of my old presentations and decided that, hey, it's a good idea, maybe we should get involved here, and they got involved in the we were involved in the Big Ten network, and I think that the success of that really whetted their appetite to move forward. But you're right. I mean, any time that you start pouring money into things, it can change the equation. And some of that's going on right now. Some of it's just been going on for years. Now it's legal. For years it was just money in a handshake, and now it's with the ability to pay players or student athletes. I still always have to say student athletes, and also to have them be able to earn additional money through NIL type things. I think, all in all is a good thing, but it creates a whole nother set of issues that, to a certain extent, I think there's a bit of a struggle with right now.
So, look, I always come with these really obnoxious questions, Bob. So I'm just going to ask a couple of you. The first one is, what do you think of this dynamic of ESPN versus Fox, with the ESPN being owned basically, or owning the SEC, and then the college football playoff. That's one side, and now you have Fox with the most successful conference for the last 3 years in the Big Ten, and they can't seem together, right? We're sitting at 12 teams for a playoff. Everybody's screaming for 16 or 24. What is the future of these two monster brands trying to work together now that ESPN is now this relationship with the NFL, and it's become almost too big to fail on from the media standpoint? I guess it's a compound question. First, how do you see that relationship growing or going farther apart, Fox versus ESPN? And the second part of that is, as the college football playoff continues to be successful, at the next negotiation, is Fox going to finally put its hand in the till and start owning part of this thing?
Well, the first question, if I think back, what we have there's always been a very healthy competition between ESPN and Fox. There's also been quite a bit of mutual respect and mutual participation. For years, we jointly owned the Big 12 rights. We jointly owned the Pac-12 rights. And while we certainly each had our own ideas of the best way to operate things, we got along. We weren't at each other's throats. In Asia, we were partners on the biggest sports network in Asia for years. People don't realize that. So, while we all had our priorities and certainly liked to compete, we were also very collegial, to use that term. Right. And people tried to probably make more of a war out of it than it really was. Now, certainly things have probably come unwound since then. I think the competition is good, and I think it's healthy. But if you look back just a year ago, here's Fox and ESPN and I think who else was in it? Turner, somebody. They're going to start a streaming service, right? Right. Joint streaming service. So you don't get to that kind of a situation if there's not, some idea or some area of a working relationship. So I don't want to blow this thing up bigger than it really is, because certainly we compete, and certainly the Big Ten is very important to Fox, and the SEC is very important to ABC, ESPN. All right, to create some side, like this gun battle going on, I don't think that's how it is. As far as the second question, I think Fox would certainly be interested, and I'm not speaking for Eric Shanks or Mark Silverman here. My own estimation and opinion is that Fox would be interested if they go to expand the games, the CFP, and they're given an opportunity to bid. We don't know really what happened last time. I don't believe it ever got to the point where it was out in the open market.
That's what we talked about.
ESPN gobbled it up, and then offloaded some games to TNT. And, the games they offloaded to TNT are the ones right up against the NFL. Gee, there's a surprise. ESPN didn't want to know it's better to take on the NFL, so we'll just let TNT do it. And I think next year, I think TNT is going to get a quarterfinal game. So how that negotiation evolves, you have to keep into consideration that ESPN has an existing agreement that probably gives them certain benefits as it relates to renewals, whether that's right of first negotiation, right of first refusal, right to match, last best chance offer, that any of those things. There's a litany of things that could be involved with that contract. So it's quite possible that Fox didn't even have an opportunity. Given an opportunity, I think Fox would be interested. Fox loves big events, and they know how to blow them out. So I think at some point it's probably going to be some sort of an NFL type scenario where you're going to have more than one network involved, or
Right.
it would behoove, to me, it would behoove the powers that be at the CFP to have more than one network involved. And by that, I mean more than just somebody who gets a couple of sub-license games dumped on.
Right.
Yeah, I'm going to extend on Nathan's question and where we are currently with this conversation, Bob, because you alluded to your time at Fox. And there was a time, of course, when college football was run by ABC and by extension ESPN in the mid 2000s. And then all of a sudden, Fox, and you just made the comment, Fox loves big events. Boom, they went for the World Series in the early 90s. They really pressed in. Once they grabbed something, they grabbed it. They not in the Major League Baseball game, and then all of a sudden, boom, they've got everything. And then we saw their entry into college football, interestingly, being no regular season games. Then all of a sudden, they grab all the BCS games, and ESPN's off the table for the BCS games, and it just seemed kind of a strange. And I was at ESPN at the time. It seemed like a strange dynamic to see a network that was not involved in college football all season then broadcast the most important games. Now we have a situation where ESPN obviously owns the playoffs. The NFL has also been brought into the conversation. They seem to do everything right. Whatever they touch turns to gold. And for a long, long time, they've obviously had multiple broadcast partners that show the AFC playoffs, the NFC playoffs, the Super Bowl rotates. And that seems to be a rather healthy format that may be best for college football.
I believe it would. And whether that implies that, so Fox has the early round games that feature Big Ten teams at home, or ESPN has early round games that has SEC teams at home. There's a variety of ways you could structure it, but I do think it would, again, behoove the folks in the world of the CFP to have more than just a singular, entity involved, just as if only for insurance.
As we look at the year over year for the CFP, the viewership has gone through the roof. We're talking tens of millions now for some of these games. Quarterfinals are actually getting more viewership than the semifinals. It depends on those matchups. What does it mean to you when an Indiana-Miami national championship might bring in more than an Ohio State versus whoever? That has to show considerable strength and importance of the playoff games, doesn't it?
Yeah, I think it does, but not to put a damper on this thing, but one of the reasons sports are up across the board, and it's like clockwork every time you wake up, every morning it's a record rating. The changes in the Nielsen methodology are huge. I mean, the ability to count the big data and the panels, all that stuff rolled in with the out-of-home viewing has been a huge change. And just this September was the first time that 100% of the country out-of-home viewing was covered the entire country. And so what they had picked up were mostly smaller markets. And a lot of those smaller markets are huge college football markets. And
Right.
so all of a sudden, all those people, which up to that point had never been captured, are now being counted. So before we, just lay this all on college football, I think some of it is technology based. I think a better comparison will be looking at next year over last year to see how that goes. And Nielsen's got some other things up their sleeve. They're creating a way where they have an app on your phone. If they hear your voice or they hear the game in the background, they count you as a viewer. I mean, that's a long way from the old days of writing down on a diary what you're watching.
Right.
And
the old days. I remember getting those things in the mail. That was a lot of fun.
Right.
Sit there and paper and pen and.
So I think, but still, I think you're right. I think that there is certainly excitement around the games. I think there's some things they can do with the structure to make it even better. It's just like today, the schedule came out for the next 2 years, and 2 years you get 2 weeks between semis and finals.
That's crazy to me.
It's going to the end of January. So,
Yeah.
Unless, the NFL is going to push the Super Bowl to President's Day weekend, they got to get done earlier. If that means starting at week 0 and somehow compressing, dealing somehow with the off week, December 8th off week, whatever, for the Army Navy, you got to figure something out. I mean, they got to compress and hopefully, in my opinion, move back and end sooner.
Bob, we know that the NFL impacts the college football schedule. The college football is trying to stay as far separated from the NFL schedule as possible, but that's become not attainable the last season, as we mentioned, with the playoff games running up against the NFL. The regular season, obviously, even in the NFL, was no match for college football.
Right.
So what are your thoughts about, and you brought up some other things with Army Navy is no longer sacred, and really there's just obvious the consumer is getting frustrated. The average college football fan is getting frustrated, but the TV networks, I don't think, are overtly or intentionally pissing off their audience or their consumer base. What is factoring into these decisions to prolong the season and these large gaps of time from, as you just mentioned, semifinals to national championship game next season?
Well, for years, they kind of worked together. I mean, we always would talk to them as it related to BCS games, and we always had a pretty good relationship with the NFL and the BCS guys, and we were able to get some things done. There's got to be a little bit of give and take on both sides. Look, the NFL is going to do what the NFL is going to do, and the NFL is going to do what's best for them, period, end of discussion. But I think there is a way to structure the games, especially with 12 teams, where they don't have to be up against NFL games. And but if you don't make the attempt, and I understand there's been some discussions, but they really went nowhere. But if you think it's hard now, flip it over to 16 teams or 24 teams and try and figure out how you're going to schedule that. I don't think this idea of somehow updating the Broadcasting Act of 1961 is going to magically, say, okay, NFL, you can't do Saturday games till the end of December or something like that. I don't see that happening. And I don't even know if it fixes anything anyway, because you're still going to have conflicts. They just won't start until January. So I don't know how it can be done, but there's got to be a way that people are going to have to play on different nights, and but there should be a way to do it. And I would hope and implore upon the groups, not only the NFL and college football, but also the networks who are involved at the CFP, to try and figure out a way to make it such that you don't have to go head to head with the NFL.
Is college football healthier now than you've ever seen it?
Well, I think that depends from what aspect
perspective.
You're looking at.
I know I'm trying to trap you, Bob.
A lot. From a television standpoint, yeah, it's pretty good business. I think everybody's getting paid, some more than others, and some probably deserve to get paid more than others. I think what you're seeing, and you saw today with the Mountain West Conference deal,
mm-hmm.
They didn't get a raise. They probably got pretty much what they got last time around, if even that. And,
well, with depreciation, they're actually making less, right? I mean, 4 years later,
inflation. Yeah, I think that was a 6-year deal or something. So, but they also lost some big markets and picked up some markets that weren't comparable replacements. But they're still there, and they're still going to be. They're getting paid. With the TV, way the TV world is, you're buying rights. First of all, you can't own everything. You just can't. You can't afford it, and you can't clear it all, even if you did. And then secondly, there's stuff that's nice to have. There's stuff that's good to have, and then there's stuff you must have. And each network has to make those kind of decisions as they allocate their resources. And then also within allocating the resources, you gotta, you can't overbuy, because you don't have enough windows to clear it all. and then you just relegate it to streaming only. And what's been shown there is that doesn't, at least in the college world so far, doesn't move the needle quite as much as what happens on the linear broadcast. So from that standpoint, I think TV standpoint, it's very healthy. I think from the student athlete standpoint, getting paid is a good thing. They deserve it, and it generates a lot of money for their institution and a lot of money for the television networks. And they were the only ones, other than their scholarships, which are certainly valuable. They're the only ones who weren't directly participating as far as getting a check. And so I think that's good. I think you've got some there's going to be some bickering between the larger conferences, between the largest conferences and all the other conferences, because the big dogs pretty much set the agenda. And, now we're at a place where even they can't agree on what that agenda is. And so that's unfortunate. I was hopeful there for a while. It seemed as though the SEC and Big Ten were on their way to doing some pretty good stuff. And then it, kind of all fell apart. Now, can it be put back together again? I don't see why not, but there's got to be an effort. And at this point, I think everybody's just happy kind of hanging with the 12 teams, and we'll take it up again somewhere down the road in a couple of years.
So, Bob, correct me if I'm wrong, but at least from an outside perspective, for the entirety of sports business on the college level, it has appeared as though the 4 conferences, and of course it was 5 at the time, worked with the networks on equal footing. They split. It seemed like there was more revenue distribution and a partnership of, we act as equal partners. And that's obviously no longer the case when they come out and just flat out say, Big 12 and ACC, you're getting, I'm forgetting the numbers, something like 13%, and we're going to get 22% as SEC and Big 10. And now we're going to try to implement something where before there is one downplayed to prove that our conferences are better that particular season, we're going to get more automatic berths than you are just because we're superior. Whether that means superior in TV ratings, or we know that that's going to translate on the football field and we'll be superior on the football field and we'll eventually earn those. Just this disparity that never existed before, to Nathan's earlier point, I don't think is good for the game.
Well, I don't really disagree. I think what has happened though is, if you follow the money, you see where the money was going to those who were performing. And I think it used to be the TV deals in the 90s and early 2000s were a lot more, I would say, equalized across the board. Then some things happened in 2009 through 13, where deals were done that certain conferences got paid much better than others. But I think that there was rationale for that, whether that rationale was involvement with their conference channels or whatever, but other ways to monetize the type of rights they were paying to those conferences. That created the disparity that we have now. But if you look at it, though, it's proven out that they probably deserve to be paid more, just based on look who's won the national championships over the last 15 years.
Yeah.
So the right people are getting paid. The question becomes, can the other people keep up when you're getting paid, in the case of, say, a Big 12 or an ACC, literally half, more or less, of what some of the others are getting paid. And that's going to create some friction, and that's inevitable. And I like to think of the commissioners as a relatively collegial group, but they also, just like the NFL, they're doing what they're paid to do, and that is look out for their conference. And from that standpoint, I can't really fault them for trying to kind of get what's best for their conference. The question becomes, you need to have, and I've been saying this for years, college football needs to be relevant across the country. It can't just be relevant in certain places, which is one of the reasons, I was so disappointed when the Pac-12 imploded. Now, we could write a book about that whole process. And my understanding is people are. So it should be interesting. I can't wait to see who's in the movie. But I think it's, that is a perfect example of what can go wrong when things kind of get out of hand. And, with just a couple of swift moves, that conference of more than 100 years old is gone for all intents and purposes. Yeah, the name's still there, and there's a couple of schools still there, not by choice, only because they were left. And that was very sad to me. And I don't think that's good for the game. And I don't think it's good for the schools on the West Coast or having to fly to the East Coast to play volleyball, or basketball or any sport. And it's better off if there's strong regionality in my mind, because, the regions are so different as it relates to college football. There's, the West Coast is nowhere near as rabid as the Southeast, and the Northeast is nowhere near as rabid as Texas and the Midwest. So you got to figure out a way to make it strong everywhere. And that's when I think one of the primary challenges that the college football world in general has to grapple with.
And Nathan, if you let me step on
Sure,
you
yeah,
real quick
go
here,
ahead.
just with
Yeah.
a follow-up to what I asked and what Bob responded to there. A little commentary here briefly before I follow up with a question is, I think you just hit on something that irks me and a lot of college football fans, college athletics fans, is that all this realignment has torn at the fabric of the sport, meaning, like you just alluded to, there's a difference between folks on the West Coast and folks in the Southeast, in the Midwest. And we used to have that continuity of the footprints made sense of the conferences. They like different music, they like different food, they have different values, they have different cultures. And it was fun to see that clash of a Big 12 school against an SEC school or a Big 10 school or the ACC or the Pac 12. But when the Big 10 runs from coast to coast, well, we kind of lost that culture. And the SECs stayed within their bounds as much or better than anyone, but they've overextended themselves into the Dust Bowl territory of Oklahoma and Missouri. But what I really wanted to ask you, based on what you alluded to with the revenue distribution being valid, that it's unequal because the power brands do bring the big numbers. All you have to do is look at the TV ratings. What surprises me is that philosophy doesn't get trickled down to the programs themselves. When you see a Big Ten striking a deal with Fox, NBC, and CBS, that Nathan's going to hit the numbers better than me, right around $90 million per program, why Ohio State and Michigan don't say, hey, here, if we really want to distribute this in a valid sense, we're probably more in the 250 million range, and Northwestern's more in like the 8 million range, just kind of similar to what the ACC did by saying,
Right.
hey, we're in this together. So we're going to take half of it, or I think 40%. We're going to split that evenly, but then we'll take the other 60%, base that on popularity and TV ratings. I would think we'd be headed more in that direction.
I think we will. I mean, short of, as I call it, eating your young or the less performing members of your conference and booting them, you're going to have to do that. And I think the ACC was very smart, as far as figuring out a way to appease Florida State and Clemson, but also going forward to create kind of this system that is, you've got a base distribution every year, but then other things are more incentive based, and whether that's performance in the CFP, whether that's performance in the keeping all the basketball units from the NCAA Final Four or March Madness, or television ratings, or social media engagement, or whatever. There's a lot of ways that you can structure it such that you will see some folks get paid more than others, as opposed to just saying, okay, here's our nut, divide by 18. I think it's got to go that way. Otherwise, people are going to be enticed by a bigger check. I mean, look at the Big Ten private credit proposal. That was a tiered structure. Ohio State and Michigan, and I think Penn State.
Yeah.
That's probably why USC, kiboshed it from their standpoint. USC probably doesn't need that money, but the idea that they weren't being paid like Michigan or Ohio State are being paid, they had a problem with that. And Michigan probably had other issues with it because they were going to get paid on the top. And I just think it's something, unfortunately, fortunately or unfortunately, it's going to happen. I think you're going to get a tiered structure even within conferences. And it's really not a whole lot different than if you look at baseball or some of the other professional sports, NBA, NHL. They retain certain rights locally and can monetize those all they want. And then they have local television deals as well. But the national deals are more or less split equally. So they've got to figure out a way to bring that kind of mentality to collegiate sports as well, and still be successful. I mean, you get teams like, Milwaukee in the World Series, and now Milwaukee doesn't have a huge payroll. I mean, Milwaukee doesn't have a huge TV deal, and Milwaukee doesn't have, huge local revenues related to advertising, signage, tickets, whatever. They just can't. The market won't bear it. And so you've got to figure out a way so that even if other people are getting paid at a higher level, the others still have a way to compete, and then also hopefully move up the food chain. Yeah, it's like the relegation advancement situation in professional soccer in Europe. You're up or you're down. You're always trying to get up to the next level, and if you don't do well, you get relegated, and then then it's a whole different business. You have to operate under a different model. And so I think that's going to be important for the collegiate world to kind of come to grips with that. And I think you will see going forward, especially if you get a bunch of private credit money coming in, those guys are going to want to pay the people who are bringing in the dough, and those are going to be the big brands. So but there's got to be a way to try and keep everybody happy and everyone engaged, more importantly.
Bob, my fault. I forgot to clear how long you want to be here. So you just put your hand up and we'll let you go. And Mark and I will take questions and whatnot after.
Okay.
But
I got about 20 more minutes.
Okay. Thank you very much. I should have cleared that with you before. I apologize.
That's all right.
If we assume unequal revenue is where we're going to be, and I think you're both right. I think we're on that train. We're not getting off anytime soon. Will you either justify or cancel this statement? We've always been in an unequal revenue world. In other words, hasn't Ohio State, regardless of these new media values and everybody's guaranteed so many millions, hasn't Ohio State always made more money than BYU? Haven't we always been in an unequal revenue state? And all we're doing now is just popularizing because it happens to be we're in a social media world. And so now everybody knows what these numbers are. I can't remember all through the 80s when I was in high school and going through, I was reading the newspapers not to see how much money BYU was making. It was to see if that year they were going to lose to New Mexico State or something like that. So haven't we sort of fallen in love with the media values because we're now paying players more than it's not been this unequal all along?
Well, you're right. It has been unequal all along. I mean, which is why, Ohio State and Texas have 38 sports and others have 18. They can afford it. And they've got, the student population is drastically bigger at a lot of these schools than others. And that all counts. But I think that the thing that's with the TV is that it's always been shared equally. I mean, certainly other revenues are a totally different basket, and those have been size-based, and what your market can bring to you get to keep. But the conference deal, the television deals have been done at the conference level, and those have historically been shared equally. I think the whole idea with some of these private equity or private credit deals, that's just the tip of the iceberg. I think if you look at, let's see how to explain this. Each school already has deals to hopefully monetize their other assets that they own on their campus, whether that's signage, whether that's experiential type things, whether it's premium tickets, whether it's all those type of things. And every school keeps 100% of that. Well, now you're going to come in and say, okay, we're going to do this private credit deal, and we're going to create this new entity, and I'm going to need to have on-field signage for every school in the Big Ten. And we're going to sell that to Rotel, the guys who make the dip. And we're going to divide that money equally. Well, the guy, maybe one school didn't have a deal. And maybe another school had a deal, and what their share they're going to get from the conference deal is less than what they would have got locally. Not to mention the fact that they've signed agreements with the Learfields and the Playflies and the JMI Sportses of the world that basically gives them the rights to monetize all of these other aspects of the athletics department's business. Not only now, but things that are invented down the road. And now the conference is going to come in and say, well, I'm going to buy all those deals out. We'll cut those guys loose, and we'll just do this all at the conference level because we've got this, $200 million private equity thing that we're going to divvy up amongst all the people. And, it's going to rub some people the wrong way. So you can share to a certain extent, but I also think that at some point there's going to always be those who are going to be the outsized revenue generators, and they shouldn't be punished for that. That's their lot in life, and God bless them. They should take advantage of it.
Absolutely, Bob. So we have these mile markers following these television deals and the length of these contracts. And they're often brought up to say, look out for realignment 2020, whatever, 2030, whatever. Since you certainly worked on this for a long time, can't these contracts be ripped up, and can't we have change in college football that doesn't necessarily line up with the end of a TV or media rights contract? How difficult is that to navigate? Yeah,
the short answer is absolutely. And I tore up lots of contracts midterm and extended them. It became a situation where everybody either wanted to be first to the table or last. And the first obviously gets there when the pot is full. The guy at the end is taking a bit of a chance that there's still some money left, but also that he's going to benefit from the deals that were done before. And now that a new level has been set as, quote, a baseline. And so that's the kind of the two conundrums you have in the contracts. And, right now you've got, 29, 30, 32, 36, I think are, the four biggies coming up, with Big 12, Big 10, SEC, and then the ACC last. And so there could be some maneuvering before then, no doubt. It's not unheard of to, like I said, open deals up early. And if the TV networks think it's important and they want to absolutely, you usually have to pay to get somebody to do that type of thing. Otherwise, time is their ally. Just kind of wait around and see what's going to happen. And if you go too early, you could possibly underprice yourself. But from a network standpoint, they would absolutely like to do that because they like certainty. They like to know what they're going to be paying, not just a year down the road, but the next 8 years or 5 years down the road. I think, one thing I have seen is the contracts have gotten shorter, and that is so that, really, I think two things. People saw the rapid increase in the rights deals. And then the other thing is the uncertainty of the television business. And do you want to lock yourself in? A perfect example, the Big 12 or Big 10 private credit deal. They wanted to extend the grant of rights to 2046. Okay, now I defy anybody to tell me what the media business is going to look like in 2046, let alone 2036. It's just changing so rapidly. And so to tie yourself to that type of a situation, or, way into the future, I think is a big mistake. And so now you're seeing the deals getting shorter. And what, we used to do 10 and 12-year deals with the Big 12 and the Pac-12, and the Big 10 network deal was 20-something years, But now they're doing 5-6 year deals because they're trying to keep some level of flexibility to kind of have a better understanding of what's going to happen in the media world over the next few years. I mean, it's possible that broadcast networks as we know it don't exist, and it's all they exist in some form, but a different form than you have now, and that certainly streaming is going to be continuing to grow. But streaming is not the answer yet. Anybody who's all in on streaming, they're missing a huge audience, a huge part of the potential audience. And there's probably somebody, in a garage in Silicon Valley dreaming up the next thing right now that's going to replace streaming. So the change in the technology combined with the change in the media and the economics of the media business are going to be drastic. And it's, they have to take that into consideration. And that's, I guess why they have consultants and very smart economics professors and things like that help them understand all this. But it is going to change. And anybody, who says it's not, have them give me a call.
Bob, didn't you hit on one of the major downfalls of the Pac-12 and its demise was that they waited too long in their negotiations and waited for too many time slots to be filled up, and they played that waiting game that you talked about before they maybe overvalued themselves and they jumped in too late?
Yes, I think, they felt they were going to get paid just because everybody else got paid. But the problem was the networks had a different estimation of what the value of the Pac-12 was than the Pac-12 had. And, that's an unfortunate and in their case, a fatal mistake.
Wasn't that a time zone thing though, Bob? I don't mean to interject or interrupt what Mark just said, but the Pac-12 is tied to 2 time zones. They're not going to play games at 9 a.m. Pac-12 time just to take that noon slot in the Eastern time zone. I mean, at the end of the day, the length of media deal and all, wasn't it more about time zones and slots for games?
I don't know. The Pac-12 would play, they bitch about it a lot, but they'd play, at 7:30 at night. A lot of other people wouldn't, which is 10 on the East Coast. But yeah, they're a time zone have the time zone challenge, but it's not to the extent that they should have, gotten blown up over. If you can say, well, if I was the commissioner, I would have done this differently or that differently. And they clearly made some mistakes, but I don't think it was strictly a time zone situation. Otherwise, why is the Big Ten so hot to get Oregon, Washington, UCLA and USC? I mean, they're still in that time zone and they're not playing 9 o'clock games on the West Coast. So it's something you just got to manage. And again, it's probably one of those reasons why the regionality of college football worked for so many years, was that, everybody was kind of in their own little region and the time zones weren't so important. I think that the national ratings are important, but the bulk of the rating is coming out of the region where the schools exist who are playing. The only difference to that is, I read somewhere that the SEC is the only conference where fans of other schools will watch other schools play, even though their team's not involved. A lot of the a lot of the conferences, it's like, well, if my team's playing, I'll watch it, but I'm not going to watch two other teams that aren't, one of them isn't my team. I just don't care. And whereas in the Southeast, they've proven, and I think the ESPN and ABC ratings prove out that the viewership levels are clearly driven by just the total fandom of the SEC. Because if you look, a lot of those SEC markets aren't exactly huge population centers.
Yeah, it's funny to see the local TV ratings breakdown of, yes, local teams, and you see just this list of Alabama, Birmingham, Mobile, etc. Then you may see Columbus, Ohio pop up. They're like an outlier, and it is funny to see where those local TV ratings are just enormous for games that don't involve the local team.
Right.
Absolutely.
It's a difference maker. I mean, the NFL learned that years ago. I mean, if you look at an NFL of a typical NFL, game on a, let's go Thursday night, the bulk of the rating is coming out of the two participating teams, unless it's a really huge game, and then you get more, sampling across the country. But the locals still drives the truck everywhere. But in the SEC land, they certainly seem to have an affinity for SEC football, whether their team's playing the game or not.
I have only one more question, and this is more about overall sports media in general. What were your thoughts about the Formula One deal with Apple TV, and did that surprise you, jumping off of ESPN?
Well, yes and no. I think ESPN, took a look at it as, is it one of those nice to have or gotta have? And I think they decided it was kind of nice to have. That Formula One has some challenges. I mean, you want to talk about time zone challenges.
Right. Well, I'm a fan of Formula One, so I was curious. Yeah.
So do you get up at 2 o'clock in the morning?
I do sometimes. I did. Yeah. Or I'd watch them on demand. Yeah. I've been known to do that.
Well, there's not a lot of you out there.
I know.
What I'm saying is,
but it is an outlier. Like college football could try to do that, right? The Pac-12 had the idea we're going to go on Apple TV, and then that sort of blew up. And so, is it a litmus test, I guess, at the end of the day for these other sports?
I don't know. I think it depends on what they're going to do with it. If they try and hide it behind a paywall, like they did with MLS, it's going to be a disaster. Like, some of the MLS numbers are finally creeping out. And I always say people won't talk about numbers if they're crappy. And you didn't hear a word about MLS numbers, subscriber numbers for that. This is it was an add-on to your Apple TV subscription. And I think my understanding, I believe, is that the Apple deal for Formula One is just going to be part of the package. And so I think that's good. That'll help. The other thing is that for Formula One, Apple can give them the whole world. You don't got to go out and cut a bunch of deals. And that's what you're seeing now, like Amazon Prime and the NBA deal. They're doing those games all around the world. And structuring, certain games with certain players, say, France for Wembanyama is playing for San Antonio, that type of thing. And they'll structure the package to get the most bang for the buck. But those games are going around the world and are available everywhere. Same as what's happened with the Netflix NFL games. And I think it's proven very successful for the conference. It's one-stop shopping. I mean, you used to, one of the businesses I ran at Fox was the syndication business, where for instance, we own the rights to the PGA Tour outside of the US, Canada, and Japan. And so we were out selling all those PGA tournaments on a country by country basis. Extremely expensive, extremely time consuming to do that. And now you can go to Amazon Prime and they can take an NBA game and they can deliver it to the entire world. just like that. And Netflix can do the same thing. And so that's a definite benefit that the streaming services have over, broadcast networks or a league trying to go out and do one-offs on a country by country basis. It's really a time consuming and labor intensive business.
Bob, we so much appreciate you being here, lending your expertise on the topic and ushering in our new endeavor here between Nathan and myself. Thompson Sports Group, what should people know about that?
Well, it's a small operation. my cell phone and my computer. I do a little bit of everything. I work with a company that owns about 40 TV production trucks on certain strategic elements. I've had a fair career as a expert witness in a variety of court cases, from the House NIL case. I was the appointed mediator for the ACC Florida State dispute.
Are you out of that NDA, by the way, Bob? I got questions that I need answers to. Okay?
I can't help you there.
I'll get you eventually.
So if it's something that interests me, I'll do it. I don't really. The only thing I chase around these days is a golf ball. I'm not really chasing business anywhere, but people know where I am, and they'll call me if they think there's something that I might be interested in. And if I'm not, I'm very happy to provide them with some names of other people in the kind of this consulting cadre that's developed out there around the sports world.
Well, Bob, thank you once again. We appreciate you taking your time to chat about college football and college football's future.
Appreciate you, Bob. Thank you so much for being our first.
Yeah, Mark, nice to meet you, and Nathan, always good to talk with you as well.
You too. I'm sorry Oregon got passed by Indiana. I don't know what to say about that.
I'm beyond that. We'll get there one of these years.
Go Seahawks. Let's say that.
Yeah, there you go.
Okay.
All right. Take care, guys.
I'll see you later.
Thanks, Bob. I didn't want to tell Bob that if Oregon did win a national championship, they would lose their title as the best program ever to not win a national championship.
Yeah, I wasn't trying to rub it in there. I'm just ribbing him a little bit, but he knows. I mean, he's a lifetime Pac-10. Oregon. He will talk Pac-10 with you forever. Super smart, and I appreciate him giving us some time tonight.
For sure. Well, Nathan, is there anything else you wanted to hit on? We could pick off some questions if there is anything here in particular.
Yeah, let's take some questions and comments. That'd be great.
I think these questions, at least in my chat right now, are all over the place. I don't know that there are any questions in particular, but
thank you, Oscar Minnie. Thanks for being here tonight.
Yes, Minnie Hunt. She's the best. But folks, if you do have any questions for Nathan and myself concerning anything concerning college football, he'll take on probably more the realignment portion of things, and maybe I'll take on some other things, but absolutely. So I'll ask you this, Nathan, to get us started on the last portion of the show, would be, what do you think, apropos to the name, what do you think is going to be the next big thing to shake up the college football world?
Boy, this whole paying players thing and pros coming back to play college sports, it breaks the paradigm. I don't even know really where to go with it. It's been shocking, some of the players that have come back and are now playing college basketball, for instance. And that doesn't seem super healthy to me. I mean, it's like we've sort of jumped the shark when it comes to access. I have a cadre of lawyers that I talk to on Twitter. They're very kind to me, and I ask them the questions, and they basically are saying, look, until you give players representation, you're going to continue to have these lawsuits, and Congress isn't coming to save anybody. If you're watching right now and you think Congress is going to pass a law anytime soon, the SCORE Act or anything else to protect college sports, there's bigger things going on in the world, right? We have world conflicts and diseases to, taxes and everything. People do not, we care about sports. The majority of the United States does not care a whit about college sports. And so we have to be, it's just, I don't even know where to go with the conversation anymore. I'm not sure what question to ask or who to go to. I just know that it's a wild open world and something has to change. We need something to get more organization. So that's been top of my mind recently.
It seems like as I monitor comments and also just the calls that come in, the number one component of angst that I hear is about the player movement, the transfer portal being out of control,
Yeah.
real no limitations on it, even though we cut it down to one window, which at least ties said player to one team for one season. We had that crazy run of 2 years where player A would play for a team, go to transfer immediately after the season, go play for another team during spring practice, not like where he fit on the depth chart or sees more money, then wouldn't even contribute to that program and would
Yep.
take off for a third team within one calendar year. So I think we've at least put a limitation there, but I think college football fans in particular are most upset about just player movement. There's a sense of pride when you turn on an NFL game and they read off their name and their position and where they went to school. Well, they're not going to be able to do that anymore.
They do high schools now and elementary schools,
Yeah.
and because they went to 5 different schools and university.
And so for me, for as much as it makes my stomach turn to put the term student athlete together with a contract, that seems to be the remedy to at least tie them contractually to a school for set amount of time, a year, 2 years, 3 years, depending on how much stability they want versus what the school is willing to give them. And at least I think that's, again, another way the NFL has this right, is that if you're an NFL fan, you go into the offseason, you have a level of comfort knowing most of my team is going to be here next year.
Yeah.
Like maybe 35 to 40 of the 53 players on the roster going to be here next year. But there's still a level of intrigue and interest and excitement about free agency.
Yeah.
Just to give it enough, but it's not wild west, just crazy. It's okay. We know that there's going to be a nice pool of free agents to keep us interested and excited.
They have a CBA.
Well, yeah.
They have a union. They have representation, right? That's the biggest problem is the players now. Let's take, what is it? Demond Williams at Washington, right? He wanted to leave and they say, no, you can't leave. You signed this NIL agreement. And he goes, well, I'm going to leave anyway. And we'll sort out the NIL rights on the back end. They can't restrict player movement until they have a contract with the players. They can own their NIL rights and they can sue them if they break those, whatever they may be, for the name, image, and likeness, that sort of virtual aura around the player, but they can't restrict movement. It's against the law. It's a form of legal, I don't know, enslavement or something, and you can't do that without a contract. So I'm all for all the regulation that anybody wants to put in college football, but until we have an actual agreement with the representatives of all of college football players without antitrust exemption from Congress, there's no way to restrict a player from unenrolling and enrolling somewhere else. You get to keep their, like I said, their aura, their public image, what they can turn around and sell, but he can go and play football wherever he wants to. So the only way, and that's, you just said it, the NFL has a CBA. They have a union. They have players that represent a certain amount of the country. And until there's a contract with the players as an entity in some form, whether that's a contract law or something that is a CBA type entity, there's no other way to restrict the player movement. And I don't think even today people understand that. They get angry that, wow, my team signed this guy. We were going to win 100 games this year. he's leaving and now I'm pissed off at the player, when at the end of the day, the player doesn't have, you can't restrict trade unless you've had a binding agreement that says the reason you can't leave is because you've traded some of your rights for these benefits. In the NFL, that CBA represents union dues, their health insurance, money that they'll earn back after they retire or get injured. There's nothing like that in college football. And I don't think 95% of college football fans understand that. That's why it's such a big deal on Twitter and social media, is because until they give these players the right to be represented as a class, the only way they can restrict anything is if they go back to the old system, which is, frankly, courts have said is against the law.
And so the other issue that most people have that would remedy, or if we simply, and I'm not a lawyer, would write this into the NIL agreements, is that we all have an issue, most of us, with these players opting out for bowl games because it delegitimizes the bowl games. It also makes them less fun to watch because we're missing some of the best players.
Yeah.
And then we don't know how to measure the conferences or measure the results because we're like, well, that team had 12 opt-outs and they only had 2 and all that other business. And bowl season used to be when you'd watch the best teams play other teams and other conferences. But I would think that could be remedied even without a CBA by simply putting that in the NIL deal, that the completion of the season is the completion of the entire season, including bowl game.
I guess you could call that a performance clause you could put in, right? Something that says you have to play a certain number of games to get X number of money at the end, or you pay them per game. But at the end of the day, if a guy comes up with a hamstring at the end of the season because he's getting ready for the NFL draft, how do you enforce something like that? How do they have to go through full body scans to ensure that they're physically in a position to do that? You and I both agree the bowl games are exhibitions. Yeah,
they are now. Yes.
Yeah. 15 years ago, you could look at the end of bowl season, each conference, and you could measure how well they did and generally understand how good or bad that conferences and those schools were. Those days are long gone now. They've been gone for probably a decade, to be honest.
And you know that drives me nuts.
I do know it drives you nuts.
Because I'm trying to measure these conferences.
Yeah. And it's impossible to do now. Yeah.
I think the first 2 that jumped off the bandwagon they come to mind for me, Christian McCaffrey and Leonard Fournette. This would have been like 2016. It was a big deal when they both said we're not playing in our bowl games.
Right.
And then it just, of course, just the floodgates opened. Michigander's here. We appreciate Michigander with this question right here. So before I read the question, Nathan, I'm going to let everyone, including know that I came up with a little homemade metric here a few years ago because I started looking through Athlon, Street and Smith, all the big preseason publications, and I determined, are they trying to be ultra conservative in their predictions because they don't want to be wrong or look bad? Or are they basically just because they would just take basically last year's standings and just duplicate it and tweak them by a game here, game there? So it hit me. I wonder how many of the teams actually have a drastic difference in record from one season to the next, because these publications are predicting everyone to basically have the same record.
Right.
They had no vision toward, predicting who's going to ascend and who's going to decline. And I started to keep track of this about at least 5 years ago, 6-7 years ago. I call it the plus or minus 3 because I determined that to be a pretty sharp contrast in record from season to season. If you ascend by 3 games or descend, if BYU's 6-6 one year and they go to 9-3, it's pretty significant. So I made it plus or minus 3. It's arbitrary, but I just came up with that. Now I ask most people this question, and they're except for the ones that know where I'm going with this, but I'll ask you, out of the 70 teams that play power conference football, how many do you believe had an increase or decrease in win total in the regular season by at least 3 games from 2024 to 25?
Oh boy, the number can't be massive. Out of 136 schools, right? We're counting
Out
all
of
of them.
70 power
Oh, you're talking
conference
about
teams.
all the power conference schools?
Yeah.
I don't know, 12.
22.
Wow.
And it's almost like that. It's almost clockwork between 18 and 25 every year.
Really?
Yes. So
Interesting.
I bring that up because Michigander's got a question. Because before every season, I'll throw out a conference and say, okay, folks, come up with 5 or 6 teams in this conference that are going to have, and it seems impossible. Like you're just throwing teams out there and going, there's no way we could see them going 9-3. They were only 6-6 last year, or
Right.
whatever. But it
Right.
happens. It's crazy. So Michigander is asking us, predict an underdog in each conference to emerge as a good team. So he's throwing out some possible examples.
Right.
So I'm going to use that as my bar to a certain extent. Take a bad team who's going to be good next year. So do you want me to go first? You're going to go first, Nathan.
Boy, I think those are pretty good picks, actually.
They are.
They are very good. Sure, I'll go first. It's hard for me to see UCLA.
3-9.
Yeah, I've never been a fan of UCLA since Aikman left. So, for the Big Ten, I think you might take a flyer and say, well, Washington played pretty well last year too. So you can't, if you're talking about plus minus 3 games, it'd have to be somewhere in the middle. Michigan, I think, will overperform in the Big Ten this next year. I think Kyle Whittingham is a fantastic coach, and all things considered, I'm glad he's not at Utah anymore. I'll take Michigan.
Okay, just as a better team, because to hit my metric, they'd have to go 12-0.
They may. Yeah, I think
Um,
Michigan. People are going to be surprised how well he does.
I'm not saying we have to use my metric to answer Michigander's question.
No, go ahead. Yeah, no.
Anyone else in any other conferences?
Yeah, I think Oklahoma State is going to do better. I mean, they'd have to be brain dead not to do better than they did last year. I think Virginia Tech's going to do well because they picked up a coach that honestly is better than Virginia Tech. Mississippi State, I don't know. The SEC is so difficult because it's so top heavy. Maybe LSU, but yeah, I think what Michigander's got here is a pretty good set of teams.
Big Ten. I'm going to throw Wisconsin into the mix. Huge transfer portal run, and for as bad as they were last year at 4-8, 2 of their last 3 games of the season, they beat Illinois and Washington. I think maybe Luke Fickell, who barely hung on to his job, maybe the final nail is not quite in the coffin. Maybe they've got some life. In the Big 12, think Arizona State 3-9, and then boom, they go to the college football playoff. Is there somebody out there like that? Is there somebody, Texas Tech? What were they, like 8-4, and then they suddenly become an 11-1 football team? Houston, look at what they did. It seems like they were all taken up last year. I don't know who's going to do it next year. I don't necessarily have confidence that Baylor is going to turn around to any great extent.
No, I think Dave Aranda is going to get fired this year.
Everybody I'm thinking of was a good team last year. TCU, Iowa State obviously lost Matt Campbell. Maybe Rich Rod at some point, but is it going to be next year? I've got no confidence in Scott Frost. I don't know who to throw out in the Big 12 that's going to jump up. The numbers simply say Oklahoma State because they'll probably win 2 out of conference games just because they'll play an FCS and a group of 5, even though they couldn't beat Tulsa last year, and then win 2 games in the conference.
Well, they picked up North Texas's quarterback who threw for like a gazillion yards.
Yes.
Yeah.
Mestetter. Yeah, Virginia Tech, James Franklin, for as much as he could not win generally the big games, he is a competent football coach. He's good. So I like Virginia Tech as well. Can't think of anyone else really in the ACC. If Florida State could figure out just they
Man, what
should
has
be
gone?
better.
What has happened at Florida
It's
State?
terrible.
Somebody needs
They're
to diagnose that, like write a book just on Florida State. It's been
yes.
shocking. Absolutely shocking.
And I think you hit on two good ones in the SEC with Mississippi State and LSU. South Carolina was really bad last year at 4-8. So, maybe Shane Beamer bounces back. Good question, though.
Good question. Thank you very much for the super chat.
We do appreciate that. And then we've got message to us says the next real big thing is the Super League. So we may be hitting on that sometime soon, folks.
That's YouTube gold right there. You talk Super League and everybody spikes, right?
All right, Nathan, anything else? You certainly need to let us know here at the Voice of College Football what you've got going on at College Football Mafia.
First of all, I just want to thank you for doing this. This is awesome. I appreciate everybody watching. This is an experiment. Wasn't sure how it was going to go. It seems like it was pretty successful. If you like what we're doing, pass the word, rewatch us on YouTube and send us show ideas. Mark and I will read those and try to give you guys feedback. Our next show will be probably the first week in March. And I'm loading up to have another pretty important guest. So hopefully you guys get into this, right? The idea is not to just sit here and just have Mark and I talk, even though we're very important to each other. But it's to hear from the experts. But you couldn't go any higher than Bob Thompson was. And I hope everybody gets a chance to rewatch that. At College Football Mafia, we're just trying to do, more of the same. Just continue to bring news and information to people that they don't have to necessarily chase down themselves. My partners Mo and Ute and the rest of the team does a great job, and I'm just happy to be associated with them. And this is going to take place, or this tonight's show is going to take place in my normal Tuesday night show. So next time I'll see everybody will be on Friday for the Big Freaking Friday show. And I just want to thank everybody for being here. This has been a lot of fun. Thank you so much for doing this with me, Mark.
Absolutely. And I want to let Pit Sniper know this is not a new studio. I just moved my monitor out of the way. That's all I did. Didn't know what to put in the monitor. So until we get the graphic in the monitor, then you'll see the blank wall. But that's all that is. All right. Appreciate everyone being here at the Voice of College Football. Again, the next time we get together with Nathan, it's going to be over on the College Football Mafia channel. So don't let that confuse you. We're just going to bounce back and forth. That's the best way to do it. And we will see you here next month. And Nathan, I gave myself a schedule that is blank this off season. People ask me, what's your schedule in the off season? And I said, well, believe it or not, maybe I think I've earned the right to just say I'm going to show up when I show up. So that's
there you go.
Doing. So
I love that. I'm gonna tell everybody peace out and go Seahawks. I got to get that out there.
I will not bother you on Sunday.
Okay, that's fine. I'll always take your text.
And folks, we will remember that we've got a conference rankings. Speaking of which, trying to make something out of these bowl results, we do have conference rankings that we're releasing here, conference by conference. So we'll finish that series as well. So be looking out for that. Otherwise, catch Nathan on College Football Mafia, and we will see you next month over on Nathan's channel. See you next time.
See ya. Bye, everybody.